Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Steve Stockton, the legendary narrator behind missing person mysteries and tales untold. This is legendary to see you here in the Fox Den tonight. This must mean it is time once again for Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yeah, I have been sleeping for so long and need to replenish myself. Much better. That was delicious, and it is always good to catch up on some lost nutritional value. Now, without further ado, it is time to take a walk into the darkness with Steve Stockton.
My creatures of the night, welcome back once again to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here in the Fox Den on Star Fox Radio. Tonight's co-host slash guest is a legend that really needs no introduction from me. But Steve Stockton has decided to stop in, and we're going to let him tell you what he's been up to. Steve, how you doing, my guy?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. You're on my radio show a couple of weeks ago. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was an excellent time, and I appreciate you, as I said, being a legend and a super busy guy, just even taking the time to hear me out and hear my hypothesis and theories, and it was good stuff, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about the legend part, but I am a busy man. I've got a lot of stuff going on. Of course, I got Missing Persons and Mysteries. That's the flagship channel on YouTube. Also have Tales Untold and the radio show that you're on, Everything Out There, which is on the Clyde Lewis Radio Network.
Awesome. I definitely advise my listeners to please do check all those out because Steve does some great work and he's actually helped me, even before I got a chance to speak to him, piece together some pretty interesting aspects of what was occurring with some of the great research that he presents out there. So there will be links to all his stuff, and I do highly advise everyone to pop by. And as I said, he does some really great work. So what else you been up to, Steve? Anything new potentially thought-wise on the Dogman, or have you heard anything new, or what's been going on that realm?
Well, I haven't really heard anything new, maybe new to me, but that's just a part of what I do is I collect legends, stories, encounters, not just Dogman, but other cryptids and things. But the Dogman, that's only been on my radar really the last few years. Now, I was in a documentary from Seth Breedlove, Small Town Monsters, the most recent one, Skinwalkers, American Werewolves too. Well, American Werewolves, I think that's kind of a misnomer. I think they're talking Dogman when they're talking werewolves or even Skinwalkers in some cases.
Yeah, I definitely saw you on there. That was great stuff. That was before I had a chance to speak to you, but definitely after. I've already been a fan. I tend to agree with everything you just said in that aspect as well. I think werewolf is just potentially a terminology that people are comfortable with just using that comes right towards your tongue. And same thing with, I tried to explain with how I approach the Dogman topic in general, is the term Dogman is just a terminology. It doesn't mean that what we're dealing with has to 100% be canine or even canine in general, meaning when people are reporting seeing hyenas and massive wolves that have manes that look like some sort of strange animal, well, the striped hyena, for example, I'll actually end up throwing the image up here and I'll show you as well, has really high up pointed ears, glowing eyes just from its natural reflection, especially at nighttime. And in general, if light hits it a certain way, they have a long canine looking snout, and they're also super tall and lanky when potentially they stand up. But the thing is, hyenas aren't related to dogs at all. They're actually more closely related to cats than dogs, but even more closely related to martens and weasels. So they have nothing to do with the canine. And we're really working on an aspect of, a lot of people don't realize the cave hyena, in theory, only went extinct 10,000 to 11,000 years ago, which is a blink of the eye. And in these areas, especially with a ton of the research you've done, there seems to be cave systems all around. And these animals felt very happy and at home, quote unquote, their name, in cave systems. And recently, by mistake, which I've spoken about this a ton on my podcast, but it's great information, so I will repeat myself. The Smithsonian found that cave system in Saudi Arabia full of human and animal bones that were pulled in there by hyenas. Yet the problem is, there's only, I believe, 4 known species of hyenas, and 3 of them are more scavengers. But the striped hyena is 90% predatory based, but they're only known to be in Africa. So, what gave, or how did these quote unquote hyenas get up here, if that's what it was, or what hyena species is doing that? And also, people don't realize with evolution, the canine, if you look at the way the 5th digit is, it's been pushed up. It doesn't, evolution doesn't remake that useful again. It's a useless digit now. Whereas on hyenas, they have almost like an opposing thumb or digit off to the side, which is a pretty interesting aspect too. And I wanted to hear maybe your thoughts on just that in general, right there, what I presented.
Yeah, that's true. It's a very astute observation. And one thing that struck me there that I think is really the takeaway, so there's only 3 known species. They find new species of animals of all kinds all the time. So who's to say this isn't just something that we're not aware of? And just because we don't know about it certainly doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And everybody's quick to want to find a label or put a name on it. You know, you have Dogman, you have the Mothman, you have, all this, but it's not so much a label, I think, but an idea that. And again, we talked about the difference between canines and lupines on my show, but yet you can crossbreed those. But then hyenas, like you said, they're not even related to either one, really. So I don't know. That's a short answer on that one. But there's definitely something out there. Too many people have had too many experiences for it not to be anything or to be mistaken or misidentified known species.
I agree with all that. And no, I appreciate that answer right there. And it's well put how you stated that. There's definitely a big difference too in between when someone, in my eyes, sees something like a hellhound, or I've heard of encounters where people say they flash their light and it goes through this. I believe those are not under the triangle of how I approach the Dogman. I think that would be more of, as you were stating, some of the darker magic, maybe bad manifestations of energy, skinwalking aspects, things that I don't know the most of, but I feel like that would probably fall more into the category of magic or something that is not physical. Where the Dogman, I've just fielded so many different reports where they're trying to potentially open doors. They're licking the window of a car, for example, or they're pushing themselves up and trying to look in through the door. They're trying to use their paws in different ways, or hands, whatever they like to say, because people say it almost looks like a raccoon type hand, like a squirrel type hand. They've been seen drinking water. They're eating carcasses like roadkill. side of the road. There's been numerous cases where people have shot at these things and caused them to bleed, run off, scream, howl. And as far as I know, if you exist as you and I exist, you're able to live or die. I mean, if you are a physical thing, whether you're a T Rex, a blue whale, myself, as I said, or yourself, or an elephant, as far as I know, any sort of weapon can take any of those down. And as I stated, yeah, some of the things don't drop them right off, but I've also heard of people using higher caliber rifles that don't drop moose or large bears right off either. People, I guess, don't take a second to think that after that shot, when it does run off and they say, oh, yeah, it didn't it. Well, they're not able to follow it, and nor did we. So who knows, I guess, the repercussions of that injury afterwards. And like I did state, there's been numerous times where people say, hey, we hit this thing, it didn't like it, it spun, it ran off, which means it has to, at least those versions, be a physical being. And also, hyenas, for example, dig burrows and they're reused by their families or packs, and their packs can range from anywhere from 6 to 130 plus. So they stay within their generation after generation. So unless they're pushed out by another pack or another larger predatory animal or human encroachment, they're always being reused. So not many hyena dens have been explored, but the ones that have been, they go down at least 7 feet. So think, like, a lot of people throughout the country have reported seeing strange burrows. I have some images of them that are underneath some like foliage kind of that burrowed pretty deep down into the ground. That could lead into a cave system, and known animals use cave systems and old mine shafts and such. So it just kind of seems pretty intriguing in that aspect that there's actually some real life type of things pointing that this is, or at least a portion of this involvement is some sort of living creature. Do you think there's any credence to that, or how do you feel about that in general?
That's another one of those. It's hard to say because there's compelling evidence for both. Some of the accounts would point toward it being a very real, very physical creature, yet some of the encounters, it's more of a supernatural type of creature that can either cloak itself or vibrate at, for example, a higher or lower frequency that we're not able to see. The spectrum of light that we're able to see is very, very narrow compared to what's actually out there. So who's to say that evolution or through whatever means this thing is not able to cloak itself, kind of like say a chameleon or an octopus or something like that that can somewhat change its physical form, change its color, but can do it to the nth degree so that it can change its very vibration to make concealment or blending in all the more easier. But again, there's too many reports and too many encounters from people that for it to be just a total fallacy or a myth or just something that's been made up. And that's real interesting about the cave systems because you think about that, any type of hole in the ground, be it a cave or a mine shaft or a burrow of another animal, other animals will use that. They'll find that and make a den or a place to live in there. And if you overlay a map of the U.S. cave systems with the clusters of missing people, that I study for the Missing Persons Mysteries channel, you find that it lines up. So either it's the world's greatest coincidence, which I don't believe in coincidence, I believe in synchronicities, but I think there's something underground that takes people, whether it's, an apex predator that we're not aware of or some kind of supernatural entity, I can't say. But there's something underground. And there's been cases I've covered where people have heard things in caves or in holes or burrows, sometimes mimicking a human voice. But the really odd part of that, it will know their name, or it'll sound like a deceased relative or even a living relative that's on the other side of the country. I don't know about you, but if I'm out in the woods and I hear somebody calling me in a cave, I'm going to turn around and run the other way.
We're not going to go in there, Steve, and figure out what that is. No, I'm with you on that. I'm totally going the other way, too. And I think that I've heard some of those. I actually had a military type case in Northern California where there was the fires a few years back, and some of these, I believe they were reserves, were sent out there to try to help the firefighters. And they had said a group of them stopped to kind of catch up, set up a generator, and they had heard basically, yes, a human voice out in the forest mimicking theirs and calling, I think it was the squadron leader over there. But as they were standing there, they saw what looked like a long, lanky, creepy looking dog-like type creature. And I think, again, what you were just saying with like the other kind of calls in the systems, I think that would maybe be a skinwalker or some of the more darker aspects of what's occurring. Yet to touch base on what you said too with the missing people, what's even creepier is if we put the North American Dogman Project map where all the people are seeing things over top of the map you just spoke about with the missing people in the cave systems, it almost lines up identically as well, which now is saying that people are seeing these type of things near cave systems too. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's dolphins, but I think it's dolphins and orcas. They use their versions of sonar and sounds to basically stun their prey. Some of their smaller fish, it like shocks them. And I think electric eels, yes, they're using an impulse, but it's same thing. It's like using an ability or electricity or a sound base to stun its potential prey. And I also think lions and other large predators, when they growl, it also stuns or scares and shock their smaller prey. Is that correct, or am I misinformed with this?
Oh, I have heard that. I have read that, and I believe it's true. And I see how that could work because if you're ever underwater, say even in a swimming pool or something, take a couple of solid objects, crack them together under the water, you hear it better because of the way those sound waves reverberate through the water. The same, I would think, with an orca or a whale or something of any size, if it's making those sounds. And those whale songs and some of that, those travel for miles and miles and miles. So if it were in close proximity to a smaller fish or maybe even something the same size, and it was using that sonic noise, those vibrations, I think it would either stun it or frighten it to the point that it wouldn't run away. I've talked about this before. My cousin had a boa constrictor, and it wouldn't eat frozen mice, wanted to kill itself. I watched him feed it one time. He puts a live mouse in the enclosure with it, and the mouse is just kind of wandering around in there. And all of a sudden, I had probably smelled the snake, but it just sits up, kind of has this terrified look on its face. The boa comes slithering out of the cover, and the mouse doesn't even try to get away. It was so frightened, it just stood there, stock still. And the snake kind of, I mean, I felt bad for the little mouse, but he just kind of whacked it with his head and kind of stunned it and then set about eating it whole or alive. So I think, again, there's things in nature that can be used that way to stun or bewilder or not so much fight or flight, but just a paralysis, if you will. It's so frightening. And I've heard of people having experiences like that where something scared them to the point of not being able to run away, that paralysis that you get from being so frightened before the adrenaline kicks in.
I love that answer. Thank you, man, because I agree with everything you just stated on that, and the elaboration of what you stated is pretty much in my head what I kind of thought about the subject as well. So that was really cool to hear that aspect. And no, I totally agree. It's no different than if someone sees a grizzly bear. Some people stand there like, oh no. Other people are like, yeah, I'm out of here. It's just a natural reaction where people freeze. And the example you just gave of the mouse standing there frozen in fear. A lot of people don't realize possums, the term playing possum, it's not because it's playing possum. It's literally scared crapless. It's almost to the point of unable to move. Well, it can't move. It's shocked. It's scared. So it's not that it's playing dead. It's literally almost scared dead. And people don't realize that. And when we kick back to the cave system, what do you think about this statement? I feel, all right, I'm going to be bold here. The majority of the people that have gone missing in these areas, I don't know what's taking them, but I think if we were able to get into the cave systems deeper and explore these type of areas, there would be a ton of people's backpacks, flashlights, bones, remains in there. How do you feel about that theory?
I believe what you said there, I would agree with. And there's been stories like that, unproven to my knowledge, but there's a famous story about a kid that was missing in Mount Shasta area of California. and saw what he thought was his grandma, but it turned out it wasn't his grandma. That's known as the robot grandma story. This fake grandma or clone grandma took him back into a cave. And in this cave, the young boy claimed that he saw backpacks, weapons, things that were covered in dust and rust and cobwebs. That would make sense that somewhere there's probably a cache. If these things rather, whatever they are taking people into caves and doing whatever nefarious thing with them. Maybe not. They're going to keep that stuff as either a souvenir or just help hide their crimes, as it were. I mean, if there's no evidence of the person going missing, then they don't even know where to start looking for them.
That is so creepy right there. Just thinking about that when you were speaking is some straight up nightmare fuel. And even though this is just from a movie take, The Descent, for example, just that scene. Also, like you said, are they keep it for souvenirs? Because I know octopus, for example, have been seen decorating their layers with the shellfish they've consumed, and even weird little things like bottle caps and such that they've found on the bottom of the ocean. But in The Descent, for example, just because we're trying to give the audience an example of whether it's Dogman or whatever is in these cave systems, they have no use for the equipment. It's literally just thrown in a pile with the rest of the bodies and the waste of the animals, in that little pool, for example. And if anyone hasn't seen that movie, there's no sort of truth to that in regards of, as far as I know, but just the imagery that they show you of how potentially an unknown species could interact or act in a cave system. What we're referring to is there's just a cache of bones and basically belongings, which is actually very similar to, in real life, the cave in Saudi Arabia where the hyenas had been found pulling in the animal bones, the human bones, and human belongings. So yeah, I just think with the lack of knowledge we have of the cave systems, there has to be some people in there because logically, whether anyone else wants to accept it, there's not very many scenarios that could occur. So if someone is attacked by an animal, okay, whether it's a mountain lion or a bear, well, you and I are going to struggle for our life. There's going to be signs of struggle, blood everywhere. Bears bury you after they poop on you and bury their cache. Mountain lions pull you up into trees. Wolves rip you apart. Moral of the story is that there's going to be a sign if that occurred. If you and I fell down the hill and broke our leg or our back and ended up passing away down there, well, they're still going to find your body eventually. Okay. Some of us could have unfortunately fallen into the water and done to the bottom where people didn't search, or maybe fallen down into an area where there's a bunch of brush over you. Okay. Or if people would like to, this is not really my realm, say extraterrestrial based things, which I do believe there is extraterrestrial life. That's just not my research base. But if they zapped you and pulled you up, okay, yes, that's another theory. But then what else after that? That leaves the cave systems that are right by you. So if it's not the animal attacks, because they're not finding that, it's not just the body sitting there, they're not finding that. That really only leaves, where are you going? Are you going upwards or in the cave system, correct?
Yeah, and I think that stands to reason. I mean, you've got to go somewhere. And yeah, in the woods, every other animal is predatory. But I mean, there's certain things that they won't eat necessarily. They won't eat your belt buckle. They won't eat your shoes necessarily. And again, those things, will deteriorate over time. But in the case of a big cat or a bear or something like that attack, there will be forensic evidence. I've seen forensic photos of such attacks. There's disturbance in the ground cover. There's ripped clothing. There's blood and other bodily fluids and things there. So even if your body's not there, there are going to be some things left over. But to me, the really fascinating, really frightening ones are the ones where there's absolutely nothing. I mean, where the footprints stop. And yeah, granted, if a big cat grabbed you and took you off into the trees, that's going to be your last footprints there. But again, I think some evidence would be found. And as far as people going into the woods to do away with themselves, I think it would be hard to get yourself into such a place to do that to yourself to where they could never find you. And sometimes it's people that have just ventured maybe not that far off the trail before they've disappeared. So again, like you, I don't know what it is, but I think there's something out there that's taking people. And yeah, there are predatory animal attacks, apex predator attacks, but what if there's even higher apex predators that we're not aware of, or something supernatural. I've had people ask me, is it Bigfoot? Is it Dogman? Is it UFOs? Is it the Fae folk? Is it human predators, serial and the like? The short answer is yes. There are certain cases, where one size definitely doesn't fit all. It could be any one of a number of things, but yet unknown, and you can't factor in an unknown in these cases. So, but what is it? That's the $1 million question.
Again, very well stated and preach, my friend. And that is the $1 million question. Bottom line is people are missing, like you said, and I agree fully. I do know, unfortunately, the serial like to go into the forest and get away from society just as other people do. Other people would like to go there for enjoyment, or deranged individuals would like to go get away because they know they can do things. And the forest is a huge area. And there's documentaries about that. So, yes, that is definitely it. And as you said, normal predation, 100%. Missed trips, falls, just common injuries, maybe a heart attack, boom. Sure, that's a portion. But then we get into some of the real stranger ones, as you stated, where those type of things can't really fall into it. And I believe, sure, there might be some feral people out there, but correct me if I'm wrong on this as well, because if when evolution does occur, if feral people were out in the wilderness and they had just gone feral, they're going to really struggle, I feel like, to even get any sort of food source. They're not going to just be able to out of the blue start running full speed and be able to tackle some deer or something. They're not, and unless they're trained in growing things, they're not going to know how to grow enough food, etc. So say some of these did, make it through that. I know there's historical documentation of quote unquote hit squads that have been sent in by the alphabet boys to kind of deal with that. So how many of these quote unquote feral people after all of that would have really been able to survive? And correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of these reports of the ferals were like around the late or maybe mid 1800s. So, okay, in 200 years, you don't develop all of a sudden these superhuman skills, especially from a lack of food source. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt that there are still some out there. They're really going to have to get someone that's pretty super isolated and pretty weak, I feel like, or that maybe was unfortunate enough to step in one of their traps, I've heard. But if you, myself, and your wife, my friends, and we're all out there, that's going to be pretty hard for some feral people to get a hold of us. I mean, we're not talking about people that have access to these crazy, like, say, hills have eyes, like that movie type weapons. We're actually talking about in evolution aspects. So I don't think that's a huge player. But then we get into, like you said, the Sasquatch and some of the, the Dogman. And I think it's all of the above. So I love how you did state that. I think it's a little bit of definitely everything. And I've never had a paranormal experience, so I just try to really approach this as a healthy skeptic, meaning that I don't just believe everything under the sun. I try to understand first what could naturally be occurring in an instance before I then step to the next aspect, meaning subjective, objective. I try to look outside and inside the box of things to just put together in my mind, in a scientific view, what could be occurring. But then once you phase all those things out, and then you still see the alarming number of people that are missing, you have to step back and be like, wow, okay, what is occurring here? Something 100% is. Is it a living thing? Well, yeah, we, the North American Dogman Project, have a lot of evidence supporting that. But as you just stated, there's a ton of cases of hearing mysterious voices and weird things like that, which, as far as I know, the Dogman can, mimic some natural type sounds, and they have like a hyena type laughter, and they can whoop, but kind of like a hyena can. But I have not really heard of a Dogman, as I like to research it, speaking to you like that. I've heard of some of the skinwalker type aspects. So yeah, that all still points to the cave systems, and literally that is where I think most of this is unfolding. And I know we need to get you going here soon, but on that topic I just spoke, I would like to kind of hear just basically your thoughts on all that as we wrap this up.
Well, and I agree with what you said there. Skepticism is a good thing. I try not to take a lot of face value, But then, based on some of my own experiences that I can't explain away, I believe there are things that there is no scientific explanation for. My father was a scientist out at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, and he would talk about in the laboratory, sometimes under extremely rigorous and controlled conditions, things would happen that were anomalous. They don't know why it happened. They couldn't get it to happen again, but it just happened. And I think just, these laws of ours that are natural, those are laws that we've come up with to measure and quantify things. But again, one size doesn't fit all. I think there's things that are, to this point at least, beyond our understanding and comprehension. And maybe someday we'll discover more. I mean, this look, and again, I like your analogy there of the timeline, like 10,000 years could be just a blink of an eye. Look how much we've developed technology wise in, say, the last 1,000 years or 2,000 years. I shudder to think where we'll be at in the next even 100 years with leaps and bounds in technology and the advancement of AI. And that's, depending on who you listen to, that's something to be afraid of or something to herald its approach, because it can be a good thing. I mean, I don't see it as any different than, say, people who used to write with a quill pen being afraid of a ballpoint pen, or the people that wrote with a ballpoint pen being scared of the typewriter. AI can be used as a tool to go through millions of calculations and computations and things that would take just an average, maybe a whole think tank full of scientists, years to go through. Supercomputer can crunch those numbers and find things out for us, or at least point us in the right direction to where to test things. Because AI is very fallible at this point. It like throws a lot of garbage in there. But if it gets to the point where it is infallible, who knows what's going to happen? But there's just so much to try to absorb on all this to even make an intelligent decision. But there's definitely an element of the supernatural and the anomalous in a lot of different things, not missing people or Dogman, Bigfoot, UFOs, just earth sciences and the wonders of our world. There's not an explanation, a rational and scientific one for everything.
That was a great answer, Steve. And I really do enjoy your mind frame and how you approach things, because that is super, super important, just to be, like I said, subjective and objective. A lot of people think that when someone is being skeptical, that it's a negative aspect, and it's not negative to ask legitimate questions and just try to present things and understand. It's just the way things need to be discovered is by asking questions. And I think sometimes people think skeptical questions are negative, which of course they can be. It's a great example, like you said, with the AI. It's just a tool and a way to understand things, and in my eyes, take things away from the puzzle in front of me. So someone could take a skeptical question as a negative thing, but like I said, it's not meaning that. It's as I'm looking at the puzzle in front of me, it's helping myself eliminate things that now don't make sense to what's occurring. It's great that not just myself, but others such as you have that mind frame and are willing to approach things like that. So no, I appreciate you stopping by tonight, and like I said, taking time out of your busy schedule, because I know you have a ton of things going on. And I definitely look forward in the future to getting a chance to collaborate with you again, whether it's here on my podcast, Midnight Lycanthropy, or back your way, just anything in general. It's great to spend some time with you and pick your mind, my friend.
Oh, absolutely. It's an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you. I love what you're doing, and I'm happy to be a part of it in any way that I can going forward. And again, I appreciate you, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by for another episode of Star Fox Radio and Midnight Lycanthropy here in the Fox Den. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm. And until next time, stay safe out there.